The Alpha King of the Northern Territories never expected his reign to end in a filthy human alley, bleeding out while a 6-year-old threw rubber balls at his assassins. Demon Nightshade pressed his hand against the wound in his shoulder, silver poison already burning through his veins like liquid fire. 3 years of tracking rogues through human territory, and he'd finally gotten careless. The scent had distracted him, young Omega, terrified, starving, and in that split second of inattention, they'd struck. The first attacker came at him again, silver claws gleaming in the dying light. Demon dodged, but barely. His wolf raged inside him, demanding he shift, but transforming now would expose him to every human with a camera phone within a 3-block radius. The council would have his head for that breach alone. If these bastards didn't take it first. Nothing personal, Your Majesty, the lead assassin said, circling with the casual confidence of someone who'd already won. Just business. Demon's lips pulled back in a snarl. The council's business? The assassin's smile confirmed everything. They came at him together, coordinated, trained, deadly. Demon managed to throw one into the brick wall, heard ribs crack, but the other two pressed their advantage. Silver blade flashed toward his heart. He twisted away, felt it slice across his ribs instead. Pain exploded through his chest. He was going to die here. In this reeking alley, surrounded by human garbage and graffiti, murdered by his own people. Then something small and hard hit the lead assassin square in the eye. The wolf yelped, stumbling back, one hand flying to his face. The object, a rubber ball, bounced off the opposite wall and disappeared into the shadows. Everyone froze. What the hell? The second assassin started. The ball flew out of nowhere again, striking him directly in the throat. He gagged, choking, his concentration shattered. Demon's eyes tracked the trajectory. There, behind the stack of rotting crates, a tiny figure, all wild dark hair and enormous eyes. A child. The ball ricocheted back into small hands with impossible precision. The little girl wound up and threw again, this time hitting the third assassin's wrist. The silver blade clattered to the pavement. That was all the opening demon needed. His wolf surged forward with a roar of fury and relief. Claws extended, fangs dropped, his eyes blazed gold. He gave up on discretion and let the shift take him halfway, becoming something between man and beast, terrible and efficient. The first assassin died with demon's claws through his throat. The second barely had time to scream. Demon spun toward the third. But the blade wielder was already scrambling backward, blood streaming from his wrist, terror replacing his earlier confidence. The council sends their regards, false king, he hissed, backing toward the alley's entrance. This isn't over. Then he was gone, vanishing into the evening shadows. Demon stood there, chest heaving, covered in blood, some his own, most not. His wounds burned with silver poisoning, but he'd live. Thanks to. He turned slowly toward the crates. The little girl was slumped against the wall, her rubber ball still clutched to her chest. Unconscious. Her whole body trembled like a leaf in a storm. Demon approached carefully, forcing his wolf back, returning to human form. He'd seen plenty of street kids in his time here, but this one was worse than most. The clothes hanging off her skeletal frame were 3 sizes too big and filthy beyond redemption. Bruises covered her arms in various stages of healing, old yellow ones, fresh purple ones, everything in between. She couldn't be more than 6 years old. He crouched beside her, and that's when he caught it. Beneath the grime, beneath the human world stench of garbage and desperation, a faded scent marker. His blood turned to ice. Shadowmere Pack. Impossible. The Shadowmere Pack was gone. Exterminated 5 years ago in a territorial purge. The council had declared them enemies of the realm, and Demon himself had signed the execution order. No survivors, they'd reported. Complete eradication. But this child wore their scent like a ghost's whisper. Boss. Kale's voice cut through his shock. His beta appeared at the alley entrance with 4 guards, all of them armed and alert. Kale took in the scene with one sweep of his sharp eyes, the bodies, the blood, Demon's wounds, the unconscious child. You hurt? Kale demanded, already moving toward him. I'll heal. Demon's gaze never left the little girl. Silver poisoning, but nothing fatal. Good. Kale glanced at the dead assassins, his expression hardening. Counsel? One got away. He confirmed it. Kale swore viciously. Then his eyes landed on the child, and his face went blank. What's that? She saved my life. She's a human world stray. Kale's tone was dismissive. Leave her. We don't take in trash. Something in Demon's chest tightened. He'd given that same order before, hadn't he? Stay focused on pack business. Don't get involved with human world problems. Maintain the boundaries. But this wasn't a human child. He slid his arms under the little girl, lifting her carefully. She weighed almost nothing, all sharp angles and fragile bones. Her fingers twitched against his chest, even unconscious, mimicking a throwing motion. She's coming with us, Demon said quietly. Kale stiffened. Demon. That's an order, Beta. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken arguments. Finally, Kale's shoulders dropped. Yes, Alpha. They moved through the darkening streets quickly, the guards forming a protective circle around them. Demon kept the child cradled against his chest, acutely aware of every shallow breath she took, every tremor that ran through her small body. In his arms, the little girl stirred. Her lips moved, forming a single word that pierced straight through his heart. Mama. Then she was still again. Demon looked down at her dirty face, at the rubber ball she refused to release even in unconsciousness, and felt the weight of too many questions pressing down on him. Who was this child? How had she survived alone in the human world, bearing the markers of a dead pack? Who had taught her to throw with such devastating accuracy? And why had she chosen to save him instead of running? The ball was worn smooth in places, held together with careful strips of duct tape. Someone had loved this child once, loved her enough to give her a toy, to teach her how to use it. Aim with your heart, not your eyes. He could almost hear the words, spoken in a voice he'd never know, teaching a lesson that had saved his life tonight. Behind them, the alley receded into darkness, still stained with blood and secrets. Somewhere out there, an assassin was reporting back to the council. Somewhere, enemies were plotting his downfall. But in his arms, a mystery breathed softly, clutching her treasure, dreaming of a mother she'd lost. And Demon knew, with the certainty that came from 2 centuries of ruling, that everything was about to change. Chapter 2. The Iron Moon Keep rose from the mountains like a sleeping giant, all gray stone and ancient power. Demon carried Mira through the massive gates as dawn broke, painting the fortress walls in shades of gold and amber. Pack members emerged from doorways and stopped mid-stride, their conversations dying on their lips. An Alpha King didn't carry strays. Demon felt their stares, heard the whispers starting like wildfire through dried grass. He ignored them all, his focus on the fragile weight in his arms and the questions burning through his mind. Kale materialized at his side, his expression thunderous. We need to talk. Now. Later. Demon. I said later, Beta. The alpha command in his voice made Kale's jaw snap shut, though fury blazed in his eyes. They climbed the winding stairs to the medical wing, Myra's breathing shallow and uneven against Demon's chest. She hadn't stirred since that single whispered word, Mama, and the stillness worried him more than he wanted to admit. Dr. Thorne was waiting in his examination room, already alerted by the guards. He was a grizzled wolf in his 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat tail and eyes that had seen too much death to be shocked by anything. Almost anything. Put her on the table, Thorne said, then paused as he caught Myra's scent. His bushy eyebrows drew together. Interesting. That's one word for it. Demon laid Mira down carefully, stepping back to give Thorne room to work. She looked impossibly small on the examination table, still clutching that damned rubber ball like a lifeline. Thorne's examination was thorough and methodical. He checked her vitals, examined the bruises, ran his hands along her bones with the practiced touch of someone who'd set more fractures than he could count. His mutterings grew increasingly concerned. Severe malnutrition. Underweight by at least 15 pounds. He probed her ribs gently. 3 healed fractures here, maybe 4 months old. Left wrist was broken badly, set wrong, healed crooked. His voice dropped. Scars on her back. Belt marks, I'd say. Recent ones and old ones. Demon's hands clenched into fists. How recent? The freshest are maybe 2 weeks old. Thorne continued his examination, but his frown deepened. He checked her reflexes, looked into her eyes, tested her muscle responses. Finally, he straightened and turned to Demon with an expression that made the Alpha King's blood run cold. There's something very wrong here. Explain. Her scent markers say omega, submissive pheromones, nurturing instincts, the whole package. Thorne gestured at Myra's small form. But her physiology tells a completely different story. Her muscle density is off the charts for a child her age. Her neural reflexes are faster than mine, and I'm a trained warrior. Her sensory development, the way her pupils responded to light, the sensitivity in her hearing, that's alpha-level development. Demon stared at the unconscious child. That's not possible. I know. Thorne's voice was grim. Which means either she's a genetic anomaly that shouldn't exist, or someone experimented on her. Deliberately manipulated her DNA to create something new. The implications hit Demon like a physical blow. The council banned genetic manipulation. 300 years ago, yes. Death penalty for anyone caught. Thorne looked at Mira with something like pity. But if someone was doing it anyway, and if the Shadowmere pack found out, they'd need to eliminate all evidence. Demon's mind raced. The council's extermination order for Shadowmere had seemed extreme at the time, but he'd trusted their judgment. Now he wondered what lies he'd swallowed. There's more, Thorne said quietly. I can smell traces of sedatives in her system. Old ones, administered regularly over years. Someone was keeping her docile, compliant. She's 6 years old. I know. They stood in silence, the weight of Myra's suffering settling over them like a shroud. Then her small voice broke through the quiet, barely a whisper. Where's my ball? Demon turned to find Mira awake, her enormous dark eyes wide with panic. She was pressed against the far corner of the examination table, her entire body coiled tight as a spring ready to snap. Right here, little one. He kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. You're holding it. She looked down at her hands, saw the ball, but her panic didn't ease. She was checking it, he realized, examining it with desperate fingers to make sure it was the real one, not some replacement. Thorne started to approach, but Demon held up a hand. The doctor retreated to the corner, understanding instinctively that Mira needed space. Demon pulled up a chair and sat, deliberately making himself smaller, less imposing. Do you remember what happened? Myra's eyes darted to the door, calculating escape routes. Bad men. In the alley. You saved my life. She said nothing, just hugged her ball tighter. What's your name? The silence stretched so long Demon thought she wouldn't answer. Then, barely audible, Mira. My mama called me Mira. Something in his chest tightened at the past tense. Where is your mama, Mira? Her small face crumpled, just for a second, before she forced it back to blankness. But her voice cracked when she answered, don't know. She left me in the alley. Said she'd come back. That was, a long time ago. How long? Myra's fingers traced the duct tape on her ball. I stopped counting after the snow came 3 times. 3 years. This child had been alone in the human world for 3 years, surviving on nothing but instinct and a rubber ball. You're safe here, Demon said, knowing the words were meaningless. Trust couldn't be given, it had to be earned. No one will hurt you in my home. Myra's laugh was bitter and far too old for a 6-year-old. Everyone hurts me. That's what I'm for. Before Demon could respond, the door burst open. Seraphina Moonblood swept into the room like a force of nature, all flowing silk and barely contained fury. She was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, sharp, cold, designed to cut. His Luna took one look at Mira and her perfect lip curled with disdain. You brought this, creature, into our home? Demon's voice dropped to an alpha command that made even Thorn flinch. Watch your tone. Seraphina's amber eyes flashed with anger, but something else flickered beneath it. Fear, perhaps. She's Omega. She's damaged. She's a liability we cannot afford. She gestured at Mira like she was discussing a piece of furniture. Send her to the orphanage and be done with it. She stays. The words fell like stones into still water, and the ripples spread outward. Seraphina's face flushed with rage, her carefully maintained composure cracking. Have you lost your mind? The council is not in charge of my keep. Your keep. Seraphina's laugh was sharp as broken glass. I am your Luna. This is our keep. And I will not have some filthy stray undermining our position. Mira had gone very still in her corner, watching the adults argue with the wary attention of prey watching predators fight over territory. Demon stood slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She is under my protection. That is final. Seraphina leaned close, her voice dropping to a poisonous whisper that still carried to every corner. You're being sentimental, husband. It's a weakness that will get you killed. Her eyes flicked to Mira with naked hatred. Or maybe that's what you want. A replacement for the family you lost. How pathetic. Then she was gone in a swirl of expensive perfume and wounded pride, the door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the medical instruments. The silence she left behind felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. She doesn't like me, Mira said, her voice small. Demon looked at the little girl who'd saved his life with a rubber ball and impossible aim. My Luna doesn't like anyone. Are you going to send me away? No. Why not? It was a fair question. Demon had sent away countless strays, refugees, and petitioners over the years. The keep couldn't save everyone. But when he looked at Mira, at her haunted eyes and the way she held that ball like it contained her entire world, he knew the answer even if he couldn't fully articulate it. Because you're supposed to be here. A week passed. Mira gained 3 pounds, and the hollow look in her cheeks started to fade. Dr. Thorne declared her physically stable, though he warned that emotional recovery would take much longer. Demon insisted she join the formal pack dinner that night. Kale had argued against it, she's not ready for pack politics, but Demon needed to see how she responded in social situations. Needed to understand what she was capable of. The dining hall was a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings and long tables carved from ancient oak. High-ranking pack members filled the seats, dressed in their finest clothes, engaged in the subtle warfare of pack politics. Alliances formed and dissolved over wine glasses. Insults were traded behind polite smiles. Mira sat beside Demon, drowning in a borrowed dress that someone had tried to make fit. She clutched her ball under the table with white-knuckled fingers, her eyes darting from face to face like she was cataloging threats. The pack elite stared. Some with curiosity. Some with judgment. A few with pity that was almost worse than the contempt. Conversation flowed around them like water around stones. Demon kept part of his attention on the political maneuvering. Marcus was making a play for more territory. Helena was pushing her son as a potential match for the neighboring pack's daughter, but most of his focus stayed on Mira. She was terrified. But she sat perfectly still, perfectly silent, almost invisible in her effort to take up no space. It broke something in him to see it. A young server, new and nervous, approached their table with a tray of silverware to replace the pieces between courses. His hands trembled slightly. Serving the Alpha King's table was a high honor and a high risk. The tray tilted. A sharp carving knife slipped free, spinning through the air in a deadly arc toward a pup sitting across the table. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Myra's hand shot out, faster than Demon could track. Her fingers closed around the knife's handle mid-flight, stopping it inches from the young wolf's face. For a frozen moment, she held it there, her reflexes and spatial awareness so precise it defied explanation. The entire hall went silent. Mira looked at the knife in her hand, then at the sea of staring faces, and something like shame crossed her features. She carefully placed the knife on the table and whispered, "Sorry." Demon felt the shift in the room like a physical force. Shock. Awe. Suspicion. The pack members exchanged glances loaded with meaning. That kind of speed, that precision, it shouldn't exist in a 6-year-old Omega. Kale leaned close, his voice barely audible. That's not normal Omega behavior. That's not even normal Alpha behavior. His eyes fixed on Mira with new intensity. What is she? Demon had no answer. The dinner ended early. Demon escorted Mira back to her room, aware of the whispers that followed them through the halls. She walked beside him like a ghost, silent and withdrawn, still clutching her ball. "You did nothing wrong," he told her at her door. "I scared them. You saved a life." "Same thing." She looked up at him with eyes far too old. "People don't like it when you're different. They hurt you for it." Before Demon could respond, she slipped into her room and closed the door softly. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the carved wood, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. The message arrived at midnight. A guard brought it to Demon's study, his face pale with disgust. It was a severed wolf's paw nailed to a wooden board, the fur matted with dried blood. A note was pinned beneath it, written in what looked like more blood. "The Omega pup knows the truth about Shadowmere. Silence her, or we will. The council is watching." Demon crushed the note in his fist, rage burning through his veins. He called an emergency meeting of his inner circle, Kale, Dr. Thorne, and his head of security, Marcus. They gathered in his private war room, the map-covered walls and strategic documents a reminder of all the battles they'd fought and won. But this felt different. This was a threat from within. Thorne spread his research across the table. "I've been running genetic tests since she arrived. Myra's DNA shows clear markers of forced hybridization. Someone deliberately combined Omega and Alpha traits at the genetic level. That's been forbidden for 3 centuries, Marcus said, his scarred face troubled. The council banned it after the hybrid wars. Death penalty for anyone caught. Which means, Demon concluded, his voice cold as winter, someone on the council broke their own law. And the Shadowmere pack was exterminated not for territorial disputes, but to hide the evidence. The realization settled over the room like a funeral shroud. "Mira isn't just a survivor," Kale said slowly. "She's proof. Living, breathing proof of the council's darkest secret." "They'll kill her," Thorne said bluntly. "The moment they confirm what she is, they'll order her execution. Traditional packs will demand it. She represents everything they fear, the collapse of the hierarchy, the dissolution of the old order." Demon looked at each of them in turn. "Then we make sure they never confirm it." "You're talking about defying the council," Marcus said. "That's treason." "I'm talking about protecting a child." "A child who might be a weapon," Kale countered. "Did you see how fast she moved? That wasn't luck or training. That was something hardwired into her biology. All the more reason to protect her." Demon's voice was firm. "If the council created her, they don't get to destroy her when she becomes inconvenient." Thorne cleared his throat. "There's something else you should know. I found traces of a rare compound in her blood, Shadowvine extract. It's used to suppress wolf characteristics, keep someone from shifting. But it has to be administered regularly over years. Someone was keeping her weak on purpose," Kale said. "Not just weak. Compliant. Docile." Thorne's expression was grim. The dozes started when she was approximately 2 years old. Which means the Shadowmere pack was dosing their own child, Demon finished, bile rising in his throat. Why? Maybe they were trying to hide what she was. Maybe they were scared of her. Thorn shrugged. Either way, the compound is leaving her system now. Whatever abilities they were suppressing are coming back, Demon concluded. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the guards entered, looking apologetic. Alpha, the pup is screaming. We didn't know if we should. Demon was moving before the guard finished speaking. He heard Mira before he reached her room. Her screams tore through the quiet hallways, raw and desperate, the sound of a child trapped in nightmares she couldn't escape. Demon burst through the door to find her thrashing in the bed, tangled in sheets, tears streaming down her face. Mama. Mama, where are you? Mama, please. He gathered her into his arms without thinking, pulling her against his chest. For a moment she fought him, small fists pounding against his shoulders, then suddenly she collapsed against him, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. I see her, Mira gasped between sobs. In my dreams. She's teaching me things. How to aim. How to listen. How to survive. But she's hurt. She's so hurt, and I can't help her. Demon's heart clenched. What does your mama look like in the dreams? Silver hair. Eyes like mine. Myra's voice dropped to a whisper. She sings to me in a language I don't know. She shows me where to throw, where to hit. She's been with me the whole time. But she's bleeding. Always bleeding. Omega dream bonding. Demon had heard of it but never witnessed it, a psychic connection between Omega parent and child that could span vast distances. It was rare, requiring both parties to have strong Omega gifts. If Myra's mother was alive and maintaining that bond after 3 years. She's guiding you, Demon said softly. All this time, she's been protecting you. Then why won't she come get me? The anguish in Myra's voice nearly broke him. If she's alive, why doesn't she come? Because she can't, Demon thought. Because she's trapped somewhere, imprisoned or enslaved or worse, using every ounce of her power just to keep her daughter alive from a distance. We'll find her, he promised, knowing he might be lying but unable to stop himself. I swear to you, Mira. We'll find your mama. Mira looked up at him with those impossibly old eyes. You can't promise that. No, he admitted. But I can promise I'll try. She was quiet for a long moment, then, the lady with the pretty hair hates me. Serafina. Is she your mate? She's my Luna. It's complicated. She wants me gone. Demon couldn't deny it. Serafina had made her position abundantly clear. Their marriage was political, alliance between two powerful packs, but it had never been warm. Now, with Myra's arrival, whatever fragile peace they'd maintained was shattering. I won't let anyone hurt you, he said instead. Mira studied his face like she was trying to decide if he was telling the truth. Finally, she nodded and settled back against him, exhaustion pulling her towards sleep. My mama used to say something, she whispered. When I was scared. She'd say, the night is darkest before the moon rises. I never knew what it meant. Demon held the small, broken child and stared out the window at the fortress walls. Beyond them, enemies plotted. The council schemed. Serafina planned her revenge. And somewhere out there, a mother with silver hair bled and fought and poured her last strength into keeping her daughter alive through dreams and impossible gifts. It means there's always hope, Demon said quietly. Even when you can't see it. But as Myra's breathing evened out in sleep, as the fortress settled into the quiet hours before dawn, Demon wondered if hope would be enough. The council wanted Mira dead. His own Luna wanted her gone. His pack was dividing into factions, those who saw her as a miracle and those who saw her as an abomination. And Mira herself was changing, her suppressed abilities returning, making her into something that shouldn't exist. Demon looked down at the sleeping child in his arms and made a decision that would reshape everything. He would protect her. Whatever the cost. Whatever the council demanded. Whatever his pack required. This Omega who shouldn't exist had saved his life with a rubber ball and impossible aim. Now he would save hers. Even if it meant war. Chapter 3. The dawn after the emergency meeting found Demon in his study, surrounded by maps and encrypted communications. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when every hour that passed gave the council more time to move against Mira. Kale entered without knocking, carrying a leather portfolio stamped with their spy network seal. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He hadn't slept either. The reports are in. Kale dropped the portfolio on the desk. You're not going to like them. Demon opened it, scanning the documents with growing fury. His network had worked through the night, pulling strings and calling in favors across the territories. What they'd uncovered made his blood run cold. 3 council members voted for the Shadowmere cleansing, Kale said, pointing to the names highlighted in red. Elder Malachi, Elder Cordelia, and Elder Thane. The Old Guard traditionalists. The official records cite territorial aggression and treaty violations. Demon's voice was flat, controlled. That's the public story. Kale pulled out another document, this one heavily redacted with entire sections blacked out. But our contact in the council archives found deleted communications. Look at this. Demon read the fragment that had been recovered. Eliminate all evidence of Project Genesis. No survivors. Cleanse the bloodlines. Project Genesis. Demon's jaw clenched. There's no official record of it anywhere. Because they scrubbed it from history. Kale leaned against the desk. Whatever the Shadowmere pack was doing, the council wanted it buried so deep it would never surface. But they failed. Demon looked toward the door, thinking of Mira sleeping upstairs, her small body curled around that damned rubber ball. She survived. She's evidence of something they can't allow to exist. Kale's expression was grim. Which means they won't stop until she's dead or they are. Demon's hands clenched into fists. Then we find out what Project Genesis was. We expose it. If we're going to war with the council, we need ammunition. Already working on it. Kale headed for the door, then paused. Demon? What if what they did, what they created in Mira, what if it really is dangerous? What if the traditionalists are right to fear it? Then we'll deal with it. Demon's voice was steel. But we don't murder children because we're afraid of what they might become. After Kale left, Demon stood at the window, watching the sun rise over his territories. Somewhere out there, enemies were plotting. The council was mobilizing. And in his keep, a 6-year-old girl was waking up to another day of being something she never asked to be. A weapon. A miracle. An abomination. A child. 3 days later, Captain Renna found Demon in the training yards and pulled him aside with urgency in her eyes. You need to see this. Demon followed her to the combat ring where Mira was training with 2 of his elite guards. What he witnessed made him stop in his tracks. Mira moved like water, fluid, precise, devastating. She dodged a strike from the first guard, rolled under the second's grab, and came up with a training knife pressed to his throat. The entire sequence took maybe 3 seconds. The guards yielded, breathing hard. Mira wasn't even winded. How long has she been training? Demon asked quietly. 3 days. Renna's voice was carefully neutral. Most wolves take months to master those combinations. She learned them in hours. Demon watched Mira reset for another round. Her movements were too perfect, too instinctive. Like she wasn't learning at all. She says her mama shows her in dreams, Renna continued. Says her body already knows what to do, she just has to remember. During the next sequence, Mira suddenly spun and threw her training knife backward without looking. It struck a target dummy 20 feet behind her, dead center in what would have been the heart. She sensed it, one of the guards breathed. The dummy wasn't there when we started. Someone moved it during the drill. She couldn't have seen it. Demon's alpha senses prickled. Spatial awareness at that level was rare even in seasoned warriors. In a 6-year-old, it was impossible. After training, he found Mira sitting on a bench, drinking water and hugging her ever-present ball. She looked up at him with those two old eyes. Did I do something wrong? No, little one. Demon sat beside her. You were remarkable. The guards are scared of me now. Her voice was small. I can smell it on them. Demon's chest tightened. Of course she could. Omega senses for emotions, combined with alpha awareness. She'd know exactly how everyone felt about her at all times. They're not scared of you, he said gently. They're scared of what they don't understand. That's the same thing. Mira traced the duct tape on her ball. People hurt what they don't understand. That's what the bad men did before. They didn't understand why I was different, so they hurt me until I learned to hide it. You don't have to hide here. Mira looked at him with an expression that broke his heart. Everyone hides, Alpha. Even you. Before Demon could respond, Dr. Thorne appeared in the doorway, his face troubled. Demon. We need to talk. Now. In Thorne's office, the doctor spread out test results across his desk like cards in a deadly game. Her scent markers are shifting. Thorne pointed to complex charts Demon couldn't fully interpret. The Omega markers are strengthening, but the Alpha markers are emerging more prominently. She's developing traits from both classifications simultaneously. Is that dangerous? It shouldn't be possible, which means I don't know if it's dangerous. Thorne's frustration was evident. But here's what concerns me, she's maturing faster than she should. Physically, cognitively, her development is accelerating. The stress is pushing her system into overdrive. How much faster? At this rate? Thorne's expression was grave. She'll hit full maturity in 3 years instead of 10. Her body is rushing toward a goal it was designed for, and I don't know what happens when it gets there. Demon stared at the charts, seeing not data but a little girl who'd already suffered more than most adults. Can we slow it down? Not without knowing what they did to her DNA. And even then. Thorne shook his head. We'd need the original research. The scientists who created Project Genesis. Everything that was destroyed with the Shadowmere Pack. Or the people who ordered its destruction, Demon said quietly. The council would have kept records. Evidence of what they were trying to eliminate. Records they'll never give you. Then we'll take them. The delegation from the Eastern Territories arrived 3 days later in a procession of carriages and mounted guards. Their alpha, Roland Silverstream, was known throughout the territories as honorable, cautious, and fair, qualities that made him valuable in treaty negotiations. The welcome ceremony was formal, with both packs in their finest. Demon stood at the front of the assembled wolves, Serafina beside him playing her role as Luna with cold perfection. They hadn't spoken since their argument about Mira. Their marriage was fracturing along lines that had always been there, just hidden. Mira stood slightly behind Demon, less terrified of crowds now but still alert, her eyes tracking every movement. She wore a simple blue dress that actually fit, courtesy of one of the Kinder Pack members who'd taken pity on her. Alpha Roland dismounted and approached with his beta and 2 guards. He was a tall man with silver threading through his dark hair, his bearing dignified but warm. Alpha Demon, Roland said, extending his hand. It's good to see Iron Moon keep again. Thank you for. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes had landed on Mira. The color drained from Roland's face like someone had opened a vein. He stumbled backward, and his beta had to steady him with a quick hand on his elbow. Impossible, Roland whispered, his voice shaking. You're dead. You're all dead. The courtyard fell silent. Pack members exchanged confused glances. Demon felt his protective instincts flare. Roland, he said carefully. What's wrong? But Roland was staring at Mira like he'd seen a ghost. The little girl pressed closer to Demon's leg, her hand finding his. Private counsel, Roland managed, his voice hoarse. Now. Please. They retreated to Demon's study, just Demon, Roland, and Cale. Roland paced the room like a caged animal, his hands shaking as he dragged them through his hair. That child. Roland's voice was raw. Where did you find her? Demon explained it all, the alley, the assassination attempt, the rubber ball, the Shadowmere scent. With each detail, Roland's face grew more ashen. Finally, the Eastern Alpha collapsed into a chair, looking suddenly ancient. 6 months ago, Roland began, his voice barely above a whisper, a woman came to my territory. She was half dead, tortured so badly I didn't think she'd survive the night. She had silver hair and the scent of an omega, but her eyes. He looked up at Demon. Her eyes were wrong. Too aware. Too powerful. Like she was carrying the weight of the world and refusing to let it crush her. Demon's heart stopped. Lyanna. Roland nodded slowly. She never gave a name. Couldn't risk it, she said. But she begged me for 2 things, protection for a child if she failed, and silence about what she was going to tell me. What did she tell you? Roland stood and walked to the window, his back to them. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old grief. The Shadowmere pack wasn't evil. They were scientists, visionaries, depending on your perspective. They believed the pack hierarchy, alphas dominating omegas, was evolutionary stagnation. A system designed to keep power concentrated in the hands of a few while the many suffered. Cale shifted uncomfortably. That's borderline heresy. It's truth, Roland said bluntly. And the Council can't allow truth that threatens their power. So when Shadowmere started Project Genesis, controlled breeding to create omegas with alpha traits, the Council moved to eliminate them. Demon felt ice spreading through his veins. They wanted to prove omegas could be equal. They wanted to shatter the hierarchy entirely. Roland turned back to face them. An omega with alpha strength, alpha awareness, alpha capabilities, but retaining omega empathy, omega bonds, omega gifts. It would prove that the classifications aren't destiny. That the system is artificial, maintained through tradition and force rather than natural law. So the Council ordered them all killed. Demon's voice was flat. Every man, woman, and child who knew about the project. Complete extermination. Roland's expression was bitter. They called it cleansing. Made up charges about territorial aggression. But it was murder, pure and simple. Murder to protect a lie. But Lyanna survived, Cale said. They kept her alive. Roland's hands clenched. Imprisoned her in a council facility. Drained her blood for study. Tortured her for information about whether there were others, whether the genetics were spreading. They wanted to know everything about Project Genesis so they could ensure it never happened again. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Demon thought of Mira, her impossible abilities, her hybrid nature. Living proof that the hierarchy was built on sand. How did Lyanna escape? He asked quietly. Roland met his eyes. She made a deal with someone inside the council. Someone who wanted you dead. The words hit like a physical blow. What? She helped them plan the assassination attempt in the alley. Gave them your patterns, your vulnerabilities, the perfect time and place to strike. Roland's voice was steady but sad. In exchange, they told her where her daughter was being held. Demon's mind reeled. She orchestrated my assassination? Not to kill you, Roland said quickly. To save you. She knew her daughter was in that alley. They'd left the child there as bait, hoping to draw out any surviving Shadowmere wolves. Lyanna timed the attack perfectly so you'd discover Mira. So you'd be forced to protect her. Understanding crashed over Demon like a wave. Lyanna had sacrificed everything, her freedom, her safety, possibly her life, to ensure Mira found a protector powerful enough to defy the council. Where is she now? Demon demanded. Roland shook his head. She wouldn't tell me. said knowing would put me at risk. But she made me promise that if a little girl with silver fur ever showed up in my territory, I'd protect her. His eyes found demons. She bet everything on you being strong enough and stubborn enough to do what was right instead of what was easy. She bet correctly, Demon said softly. While Demon was learning truths that would reshape everything, Serafina was spiraling. She stood at her chamber window, watching her mate walk through the gardens with Mira. The little girl was showing him something, probably that damned ball, and Demon was laughing. Actually laughing, the sound rich and genuine. Serafina couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed with her. Their marriage had never been about love. It was alliance, politics, duty. She'd accepted that. Made her peace with a husband who was respectful but distant, who shared her bed out of obligation and nothing more. But watching him with Mira, the gentleness in his touch, the warmth in his eyes, the protective way he angled his body toward her, Serafina saw everything she'd never had. Would never have. My lady? Her handmaiden, Iris, entered with fresh linens. Are you well? No. The word escaped before Serafina could stop it. No, Iris. I am not well. Iris set down the linens and approached carefully. She'd served Serafina for 15 years, had watched this cold marriage slowly suffocate her mistress's spirit. It's the child, Iris said gently. It wasn't a question. He looks at her the way I always wanted him to look at me. Serafina's voice cracked. With love. Like she matters. Like she's precious. You're his Luna. I'm his political arrangement. The words burst out, years of resentment and loneliness bubbling to the surface. I've given him everything, my loyalty, my Pax alliance, my body when he needs an heir we'll never have, and I'm still nothing to him. But a broken, traumatized child appears, and suddenly he has a heart again. Iris was silent, and in that silence, Serafina saw the truth reflected back at her. She was jealous. Bitterly, desperately jealous of a 6-year-old girl who'd done nothing wrong except survive. What will you do? Iris asked quietly. Serafina stared out the window, watching Demon swing Mira into his arms when she stumbled. The little girl shrieked with surprised laughter, a sound of pure joy that cut through Serafina like glass. What I must, she whispered. To protect my position. The meeting took place 3 nights later in the forest beyond the keep's walls. Serafina wore a hooded cloak and moved through the shadows like a ghost, her heart pounding with guilt and determination in equal measure. A figure waited at the designated spot, also cloaked. When he removed his hood, Serafina's breath caught. Marcus. Demon's cousin, the one who'd been vocal about the old ways, about maintaining hierarchy and tradition. Lady Serafina. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. I wondered when you'd reach out. You want the pup gone, Serafina said. Not a question. I want the abomination eliminated before it destroys everything we've built. Marcus's voice was cold. She's a hybrid freak who shouldn't exist. Her very presence threatens the natural order. I just want my mate back. The words tasted like ash in Serafina's mouth. The child is a distraction. She's more than a distraction. Marcus stepped closer. She's evidence that threatens the entire council. Help me take her, and I'll ensure she disappears. No blood on your hands. No connection to you. She'll simply vanish. Serafina's conscience warred with her jealousy. She wasn't a cruel woman, or at least, she hadn't thought she was. But years of being unloved had hardened something inside her, made her capable of things she'd once found unthinkable. What will you do with her? Her voice was barely audible. Deliver her to those who want her silenced. Marcus's expression was matter of fact. The council will handle it from there. Cleanly. Efficiently. It's better this way, better for everyone. She's just a child. She's a weapon wearing a child's face. Marcus leaned in, his voice persuasive. You've seen what she can do. The speed, the awareness, the unnatural abilities. What happens when she's fully grown? When she realizes her power? She'll tear our world apart. Serafina closed her eyes, seeing Myra's small face, her two old eyes, the way she still flinched when people moved too quickly. She saw the bruises that had faded but left scars on that little soul. She also saw Demon's face, the love in his eyes when he looked at the girl. Love he'd never shown his Luna. During the new moon ceremony, Serafina heard herself say, "Security will be divided. The pack will be distracted. But I want no trace leading back to me. None." Marcus bowed mockingly. "As you wish, my Luna." As Serafina walked back to the keep, tears streaming down her face, she told herself it was for the best. For the pack. For the natural order. For her marriage. She didn't let herself think about what she'd just become. The new moon ceremony arrived with autumn's chill in the air. The entire pack gathered in the ceremonial clearing, a sacred space deep in the forest where ancient magic still hummed beneath the earth. Hundreds of candles and torches turned the clearing into a constellation of flickering light. Pack members wore ceremonial dress, flowing robes and ancient symbols painted on skin. It was a time to honor the goddess, strengthen bonds, celebrate unity. Mira sat with the other young pups, her white ceremonial dress making her look even smaller and more fragile. She was nervous but excited, her first pack ceremony, her first real chance to belong. Demon stood at the center of the clearing, Serafina beside him. Together they would lead the ceremony, speak the ancient words, offer blood to the moon. It was tradition. Sacred duty. Serafina played her role perfectly, her face serene, her voice steady. Inside, guilt was eating her alive. As the ceremony reached its peak, Demon drew his ceremonial blade and cut his palm, letting blood drip onto the earth. His voice rang out in the ancient tongue, words that had been spoken for 10,000 years. The pack closed their eyes and repeated the chant, their voices rising in harmony. That's when the shadows moved. Marcus and 3 rogues emerged from the darkness with predatory precision. They moved during the chant when everyone's eyes were closed, heading straight for the pup section like arrows to a target. One rogue grabbed Mira, clamping a filthy hand over her mouth. But Mira had been training. Her body reacted before her mind could process the threat. She bit down hard, tasted blood, twisted free with a move Captain Rena had taught her. And screamed. The ceremony shattered like glass. Pack members surged to their feet, warriors reaching for weapons, mothers pulling children close. Chaos erupted in the sacred clearing. Demon spun toward Myra's scream, saw the rogue grabbing for her again, and his wolf exploded forward with a roar that shook the trees. But Marcus blocked his path, silver blade gleaming in the torchlight. "Hello, cousin." Marcus's smile was cold. "Time we discussed your outdated progressive ideals." "You dare," Demon's voice was pure alpha fury. "In a sacred ceremony? You violated every law. Laws created by weaklings." Marcus attacked, his blades singing through the air. "The strong don't need laws. They need power." They clashed violently, alpha against alpha, cousin against cousin. Around them, the pack scrambled to defend the pups while rogues fought with desperate ferocity. And Mira ran. Terror drove her into the forest, her small legs pumping as fast as they could. She could hear the rogues behind her, their breathing harsh, their footsteps heavy. Memories crashed over her, other times she'd run, other times she'd been hunted. The beatings. The cruelty. The voices telling her she was worthless, broken, wrong. "Mama," she sobbed as she ran. "Mama, help me." 2 rogues cornered her against a massive oak tree, their eyes gleaming with malice. "Should have died with your pack, little freak," one snarled. They lunged. And something inside Mira shattered. Pain exploded through her body, bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding, skin stretching and shifting. She screamed, the sound morphing into something animal and desperate. The transformation shouldn't be possible. Pups didn't shift until age 10 at the earliest. Their bodies weren't ready, their wolves too immature. But Mira wasn't a normal pup. When the agony finally ended, she stood on 4 legs, panting, disoriented. The rogues stopped in their tracks. Myra's fur was pure silver, shimmering like moonlight given form. Her body had the bone structure and musculature of an alpha, larger than any pup should be, stronger, built for power. But her eyes glowed soft gold, gentle and empathetic, unmistakably Omega. She was impossible. Beautiful. Terrifying. Perfect hybrid creation. The rogues recovered their shock and attacked, thinking she was still vulnerable, still just a child in a wolf's shape. They were wrong. Myra's instincts took over, not alpha aggression but Omega survival. She moved with grace that defied nature, dodging strikes with impossible precision. When she fought back, it wasn't to kill but to disable. Precision strikes to joints. Pressure on nerve clusters. Moves that neutralized threats without ending lives. Within seconds, both rogues lay unconscious on the forest floor. Mira stood over them, trembling, confused by what she'd become. Then she caught a scent on the wind. Fear. Pain. Her pack. She ran toward it. Demon had defeated Marcus but kept him alive. He needed answers, needed to know who else was involved. He'd left his cousin unconscious and bleeding, turning to follow Myra's scent into the forest. His heart pounded with terror. She was just a child. Alone. Being hunted. What he found stopped him cold. Mira in wolf form, silver and glowing, something out of legend, standing protectively over 2 unconscious rogues. And beyond her, Serafina, who'd followed to witness the kidnapping she'd helped arrange. But something had gone wrong. One of the rogues had turned on Serafina when the plan fell apart, seeing her as a target instead of an ally. Now he had her pinned against a tree, silver blade at her throat. Mira didn't hesitate. She lunged with hybrid strength, her jaws clamping on the rogue's arm. She didn't understand betrayal yet, didn't know that Serafina had tried to have her killed. She only saw someone from her pack in danger. The rogue screamed as Myra's bite shattered bone. She dragged him off Serafina with terrifying ease, her instincts driving her to neutralize the threat. She was going to crush his skull. Mira, stop. Demon's alpha command cut through the red haze of her instincts. Mira froze, her jaws still locked on the rogue's arm. Confusion swirled in those soft gold eyes. Let him go, little one. He's done. Mira released the rogue, who collapsed whimpering. Then the shift hit her, her body transforming back to human, naked and shaking in the cold night air. She looked at her hands, saw blood, and her small voice cracked with horror. Did I kill him? I didn't mean to. I just wanted to help. Demon was already moving, shedding his cloak and wrapping it around her trembling form. He pulled her against his chest, feeling her heart race like a trapped bird. You saved her, little one. His voice was gentle despite the fury burning in his chest. You saved someone who didn't deserve it. Mira looked up at him, then at Serafina, who was slumped against the tree, her perfect face streaked with tears. The pretty lady is crying, Mira said, her Omega empathy cutting through even her own trauma. Did I scare her? Demon's heart broke. This child had just been hunted, had shifted for the first time in agony, had nearly killed to protect someone, and she was worried about scaring her attacker. No, Mira. You didn't scare her. He looked at Serafina with cold fury. She's crying because she finally understands what she's done. Back at the keep, with Marcus and the rogues imprisoned in the dungeons, the truth came out. Serafina sat in Demon's study, her carefully constructed facade shattered. Pack elders and inner circle members filled the room, their faces ranging from shock to disgust. I was jealous, Serafina confessed, her voice breaking. I watched him care for her, protect her, show her the love he never showed me. And I wanted my place back. I wanted to matter to my own mate. The room was silent except for her sobs. I contacted Marcus. Arranged for them to take her during the ceremony. I told myself it would be clean, that she'd just disappear, that no one would get hurt. She looked up at Demon with red, swollen eyes. I didn't think they'd actually hurt her. I thought they'd just take her away. And that makes it better? Kale's voice was ice. You handed a child over to killers because you were jealous? I know. Serafina's hands shook. I know what I am. I know what I've become. Mira stood beside Demon, still wrapped in his cloak, her small hand gripping his. She looked at Serafina with those impossibly old eyes. Why did you hate me? Her voice was quiet, curious rather than accusing. Serafina met her gaze, and something in her broke completely. Because he looked at you the way I always wanted him to look at me. With love. Like you mattered more than duty or politics or power. You were everything I couldn't be to him. The admission hung in the air, raw and painful. You're not a monster, Mira said softly. Monsters don't cry. Mama used to say people do bad things when they're hurting inside. When the pain gets too big to hold. Serafina stared at this child who should hate her, who had every right to demand her execution, who was instead offering understanding. I'm so sorry, Serafina whispered. I'm so sorry, little one. Then she was sobbing, years of loneliness and bitterness and unlove pouring out in ugly, gasping cries. For the first time since her arranged marriage began, she showed genuine emotion. Demon looked at his Luna, this woman he'd never loved but had tried to respect, and felt only exhaustion. Their marriage had been dying for years. Tonight had simply driven the final nail in the coffin. You'll be confined to your chambers pending formal judgment, he said quietly. The Council of Elders will decide your fate. Serafina nodded, too broken to argue. As guards led her away, Mira tugged on Demon's hand. Will they hurt her? I don't know. I don't want them to. Myra's voice was small. She was wrong, but she's still Pack. Mama said Pack means family, even when family is hard. Demon lifted Mira into his arms, this impossible child with her impossible wisdom. When did you get so smart? I'm not smart. Mira rested her head on his shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her. I just remember what Mama taught me. In the dungeons, Demon found Marcus chained to the wall, his wounds treated but his spirit unbroken. Who on the council helped you? Demon's voice was deadly quiet. Marcus laughed, the sound bitter and mocking. Elder Malachi, Elder Cordelia, Elder Thane. The traditionalist faction. They see what you're doing, protecting hybrids, reforming old laws, treating omegas like equals, and they know you'll destroy their power structure. Why did you join them? Because you're weak, cousin. Marcus's eyes blazed with fervor. Your progressive ideals will tear our world apart. The hierarchy exists for a reason. Alphas lead because we're strong. Omegas serve because that's their nature. You disrupt that balance, and everything collapses into chaos. Demon leaned close, his voice dropping to a growl. No, Marcus. The hierarchy exists to keep people like you in power. It's built on a lie, that strength comes from classification rather than character. That Omega means lesser, that Alpha means worthy. He straightened. And I'm going to burn that lie to the ground. You'll fail. Marcus spat blood. The council is too powerful. They've survived for millennia because they understand how to maintain order. You're just one alpha king with a bleeding heart and a freak child. You'll be crushed. Maybe. Demon turned to leave. But at least I'll die knowing I tried to do what was right instead of what was easy. As he climbed the stairs from the dungeons, Demon felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. The council's conspiracy was exposed, but they were more powerful than he'd realized. His own Luna had betrayed him out of jealousy and pain. His pack was dividing into factions. And Mira, brave, broken, impossible Mira, was caught in the center of it all, a child who'd shifted into a form that defied natural law. Living proof that the hierarchy was built on sand. He found her in her room, curled up with her ball, talking softly to someone who wasn't there. "It's okay, Mama. I'm safe now. The Alpha King protects me. He's nice. He doesn't hurt me like the bad men did." Her small voice cracked. "When are you coming back? I miss you. I miss you so much." Demon stood in the doorway, his heart shattering, listening to a 6-year-old beg for a mother who might already be dead. Or worse, alive and imprisoned, pouring her last strength into dream bonds to keep her daughter safe. Somewhere out there, enemies were plotting. The council was preparing for war. And Demon knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to change. He'd chosen his side. Chosen to protect an Omega who shouldn't exist, to defy a council that had murdered innocents to protect their lies, to burn down a hierarchy built on oppression. There was no going back now. Only forward, into war. Chapter 4. The summons arrived at dawn, carried by a council messenger whose hands trembled as he delivered the sealed parchment. Demon broke the wax seal bearing the ancient wolf sigil and read the words that would change everything. Alpha King Demon Nightshade is hereby commanded to appear before the emergency tribunal at the Grand Hall of Ancients. Failure to comply will result in immediate revocation of territorial rights and pack status. Kale read over his shoulder, his jaw clenched. It's a trap. Of course it is. Demon set the parchment down carefully. But refusing would give them justification to move against us with full force. They're going to demand Mira. Let them demand. Demon's voice was steel. They won't get her. 3 days later, Demon stood in the Grand Hall of Ancients, a massive stone amphitheater carved into the mountain itself by the first werewolf clans. Torches lined the curved walls, their flames casting dancing shadows across stone that had witnessed millennia of pack history. Every major decision in werewolf civilization had been made here: treaties, wars, the creation of the council itself. 7 council elders sat on high thrones arranged in a semicircle, looking down at Demon like judges at an execution. The assembled pack representatives filled the stone benches, hundreds of wolves bearing witness to what everyone suspected would be a political crucifixion. Elder Malachi spoke first. He was ancient beyond measure, his face carved into permanent lines of cold authority. Alpha King Demon Nightshade. You harbor an abomination, a genetic aberration that threatens the natural order. You have been ordered to surrender the hybrid child for evaluation. Demon's voice echoed through the amphitheater, clear and unflinching. Evaluation? You mean execution. Let's not pretend otherwise. A ripple of shocked murmurs ran through the crowd. No one spoke to the council this way. Elder Cordelia leaned forward, her face carved from ice. The child is a genetic aberration. She threatens everything we've built. She must be studied and contained for the safety of all packs. She's 6 years old, Demon growled, his alpha presence filling the chamber. She's a child who's been tortured and abandoned. And you want to imprison her for the crime of existing. Elder Thane, massive and scarred from centuries of battles, pounded his staff against stone. The crack echoed like thunder. The law is clear. Genetic manipulation is forbidden. The Shadowmere pack violated sacred prohibitions. Demon's eyes blazed gold as his wolf surged close to the surface. You mean the Shadowmere pack you exterminated? The innocent families, men, women, children, you murdered to hide your fear of change? The hall erupted. Pack representatives turned to each other, voices rising in confusion and outrage. Some had suspected the official story was incomplete, hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. Order. Malachi's command silenced the crowd. His gaze fixed on Demon with lethal intent. Watch your accusations, Alpha King. You rule at our pleasure. Demon stepped forward, and something in his bearing made even the elders shift uncomfortably. This wasn't a defendant begging for mercy. This was a king claiming his authority. No. His voice carried to every corner of the ancient hall. I rule because my pack chose me. Because I earned their loyalty through action, not birthright. And I will not hand over an innocent child to be butchered by cowards who fear their own obsolescence. Then you refuse a direct council order? Cordelia's voice was dangerous. I invoke the ancient right of protection. Silence fell like a physical weight. Demon let it stretch, let them absorb what he'd just done. The ancient right of protection was old law, so old that most wolves had forgotten it existed. It hadn't been invoked in 3 centuries. The ancient right states, Demon continued, his voice ringing with conviction, that any alpha king may adopt and protect any pup who saves his life through courageous action. That child becomes blood of his blood, pack of his pack. Untouchable by council decree. Elder Cordelia's eyes narrowed dangerously. The right only applies to wolves of pure lineage. Show me where it says that. Demon's challenge was direct. I've read the original texts, the ones written before the council decided to rewrite history to suit their agenda. There are no specifications about genetics. Only about courage and the saving of a life. The council members exchanged glances. Demon had found a legal loophole they couldn't easily dismiss without revealing how much they'd corrupted the original laws. Elder Thane rose from his throne, his massive frame casting shadows across the hall. Very well. If you claim the right of protection, then prove the child is worthy. Let her survive the trial of blood. The crowd gasped. Pack representatives turned to each other in shock and horror. The trial of blood was ancient and brutal, a test of strength, courage, and well designed for adult warriors seeking to prove their worth. It involved combat, endurance challenges, and trials that had killed seasoned fighters. She's 6 years old, Demon said, his voice dangerously quiet. Then she'll fail, and your claim will be void. Thane's smile was cruel. Unless you withdraw your invocation? Demon opened his mouth to respond, to tell them exactly what he thought of their sadistic manipulation. The alarms shattered the moment. Emergency bells rang throughout the grand hall, their urgent clanging drowning out everything else. A guard burst through the main entrance, his face pale with terror. Attack! Iron Moon Keep is under siege. Demon's blood turned to ice. How many? Over 200, Alpha. Multiple packs. They're targeting the nursery and Omega quarters. Marcus. That bastard had timed his coup perfectly. Striking while Demon was trapped at the tribunal, unable to defend his home. Demon's communicator crackled to life. Kale's voice came through, strained but controlled. Boss, we're holding, but barely. Marcus is leading them personally. They're organized, well-armed. This isn't a raid, it's an invasion. The council watched with barely concealed satisfaction. They'd orchestrated this, or at least allowed it to happen. Forced Demon to choose between political battle and defending his pack. Go, Kale's voice said, as if reading his alpha's mind. Protect our home. We'll handle the council's dogs. Demon turned to face the elders one final time. This conversation isn't over. When I return, we're rewriting every law that allows you to murder children. If you return, Malachi said softly. Demon shifted mid-stride, his wolf form tearing free with explosive force. He was running before he fully transformed, racing from the grand hall with speed born of desperation. Behind him, the council sat in their thrones, confident they'd won. They had no idea what was about to happen. Iron Moon Keep was burning. Demon saw the smoke from miles away, black columns rising against the afternoon sky. His wolf pushed harder, faster, his heart hammering with fear for his pack. For Mira. He burst through the tree line to find chaos. Over 200 wolves, traditionalists from a dozen packs, swarmed the keep's defenses. They attacked in coordinated waves, using tactics that spoke of military planning. Marcus had prepared for this, recruited allies who believed Demon's reforms would destroy their way of life. The defenders were outnumbered but fighting with desperate courage. They had the advantage of fortified positions and intimate knowledge of the keep's layout, but it was only a matter of time before sheer numbers overwhelmed them. Demon crashed into the battle like a force of nature, his alpha dominance radiating outward. Several attackers faltered, their wolves responding instinctively to a superior predator. Captain Rena was defending the nursery entrance, blood streaming from a gash across her face. 5 wolves surrounded her, pressing the attack. She fought with savage efficiency, but exhaustion was taking its toll. Then Demon saw something that made his heart stop. The nursery doors were open. Young pups huddled inside, crying, terrified. The defenders had been forced back, and now the attackers were breaching the final barrier. No! Demon roared, changing direction. He didn't make it. A small silver form burst from the nursery in a blur of impossible speed. Mira. She'd shifted into her hybrid form, silver fur gleaming, body built with alpha strength but moving with omega grace. She positioned herself between the attackers and the pups, a living shield. Mira, get back! Rena shouted. But Mira didn't retreat. Her soft gold eyes fixed on the attackers with unwavering determination. The first wolf lunged at her, expecting an easy kill. Mira moved. Her hybrid abilities were extraordinary, but not in the way anyone expected. She didn't fight with alpha aggression or omega submission. She fought with precision born from her unique nature, omega empathy allowing her to sense attack patterns before they happened, alpha strength allowing her to act on that knowledge. She dodged, redirected, disabled. Never killing, always protecting. Every movement was calculated to neutralize threats without fatal force. Within moments, 3 attackers lay unconscious at her feet. The defenders rallied. If a 6-year-old could stand and fight, how could they do any less? But more critically, the Omega Pack members, usually sheltered during battles, emerged from the keep. They weren't warriors, but they were parents, caregivers, protectors. They'd spent their lives being told they were weak, submissive, meant to be protected. Watching Mira, an Omega, defend the nursery shattered that lie. They grabbed whatever weapons they could find and joined the battle. The tide was turning. Demon fought his way through the chaos, his wolf tearing through enemies with brutal efficiency. But his focus remained on Mira, this impossible child who'd chosen to be a shield for others. He reached her just as exhaustion finally claimed her. She collapsed mid-shift, returning to human form in a tangle of limbs. Demon caught her, wrapping her in his cloak. "I'm sorry," Mira whispered, trembling. "I know I was supposed to hide. But the babies were crying. I couldn't let the bad men hurt the babies." Demon held her close, his chest tight with pride and terror. "You did exactly right, little one." Around them, the battle was ending. The sight of their alpha king fighting alongside a hybrid pup, and winning, had demoralized the attackers. Many began retreating, questioning why they were even fighting. But Marcus wasn't done. Demon found Serafina in the eastern tower, cornered by his cousin. "You failed me," Marcus snarled, circling her like a predator. Blood dripped from his jaws, he'd killed today, and the scent of it clung to him. "You were supposed to deliver the hybrid. Instead, you confessed like a weak, pathetic." "I made a mistake trusting you," Serafina cut him off. Her voice was different, harder, certain. "I won't make that mistake twice." She shifted and attacked. They fought viciously in the confined space. Marcus was stronger, more experienced, but Serafina fought with the fury of someone who'd finally found her spine. It wasn't enough. Marcus drove her back against the wall, his claws finding her throat. "Die knowing you were always worthless." His strike came fast, brutal, aimed at her heart. And Mira appeared from nowhere. The little girl threw herself between them with desperate speed, her small body intercepting the blade meant for Serafina's chest. Silver pierced Myra's shoulder. She screamed, silver burned like acid, poison spreading through her hybrid system. But the interruption gave Serafina the opening she needed. She shifted partially, her claws extending, and drove them into Marcus's throat. Not killing him, but incapacitating him completely. Marcus collapsed, choking, defeated. Serafina stared at Mira in shock. "Why? I betrayed you." I tried to have you killed. Mira, tears streaming from the pain, looked up at her with those impossibly compassionate eyes. You're still Pac. Mama said Pac means family, even when family is hard. Demon crashed through the tower door, having followed Myra's scent. He took in the scene, Marcus dying, Serafina wounded, Mira bleeding from a silver wound, and his control shattered. He dealt with Marcus quickly, brutally, leaving his cousin broken but alive. Then he was at Myra's side, examining her shoulder with frantic hands. Dr. Thorne, he roared. Now. But Marcus wasn't finished. With his last strength, he pulled a hidden silver dagger from his belt. His hand shook, his vision blurring, but hatred gave him focus. He lunged one final time, aiming for Myra's heart as she lay vulnerable. Serafina moved on pure instinct. She threw herself over Myra's small body, becoming a shield just as Mira had been for the nursery pups. The silver blade drove deep into Serafina's back, piercing her lung. Blood bubbled on her lips, but she didn't move from protecting the child beneath her. No. Demon caught Serafina as she started to collapse, his wolf howling with grief and rage. Marcus had no time to feel triumph. Demon's claws found his throat, and this time, he showed no mercy. His cousin died with shock in his eyes, unable to believe that Demon, progressive, merciful Demon, had actually killed him. Demon immediately returned to Serafina, lowering her gently to the floor. Mira crawled to her side despite her own wound, tears streaming. Why? Mira asked, her small voice breaking. You didn't like me. Serafina touched Myra's face with a trembling hand, her breathing labored. Each word cost her, but she forced them out anyway. I was wrong. So wrong about everything. You're not the monster, I was. Blood trickled from her mouth. You showed me what real courage looks like. What real strength is. Demon held his Luna, this woman he'd never loved but had tried to respect, and felt the weight of their failed marriage finally finding meaning in its end. I'm sorry, Serafina whispered to him. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. But she is. That child is everything good I could never be. You redeemed yourself, Demon said, and he meant it completely. You died a hero, Serafina. Her eyes were closing, life fading with each struggled breath. Her last words were for Mira, protect him. He's going to change the world. And you're going to help him. She died with a peaceful expression, having finally found purpose in sacrifice. Dawn broke over Iron Moon Keep, painting the blood-stained courtyard in shades of gold and amber. 32 defenders had died. Countless more were injured. But the nursery was intact, not a single pup harmed. Dr. Thorne worked frantically on Myra's shoulder wound, extracting the silver and treating the poisoning. She would survive, but the scar would be permanent. As the survivors gathered in the courtyard, Demon stood before them with Mira cradled in his arms. The attackers who'd surrendered were rounded up, bound, waiting for judgment. Demon surprised everyone. You were told lies, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Told that change means destruction. That protecting hybrids would tear our world apart. Look around you. See what your fear has wrought. He held Mira up slightly, letting them see her small form, her wounded shoulder, her tear-stained face. This child, this abomination, you were sent to destroy, saved enemies who could have left her to die. She protected pack members who had no claim on her loyalty. She embodies what we should be, strong without cruelty, protective without domination. Some of the prisoners looked ashamed. Others remained defiant, but Demon could see doubt creeping into their expressions. I'm offering you a choice, he continued. Join us in building something better, or leave and cling to your dying traditions. But if you raise arms against innocence again, if you threaten children, if you murder those who can't defend themselves, I will show no mercy. The choice was theirs. And slowly, grudgingly, most chose to stay. They were still treating the wounded when commotion erupted at the gates. A lone wolf approached, stumbling, barely able to walk. The guards moved to intercept, weapons raised, but something in Demon's alpha senses spiked with recognition. "Wait," he commanded. The wolf collapsed at the gates, shifting to human form with agonizing slowness. It was a woman. Emaciated, covered in scars and half-healed wounds that spoke of systematic torture. Her silver hair was tangled and matted with blood and filth. Her body bore the marks of years of abuse, broken bones that had healed crooked, burns, lash marks, evidence of unspeakable suffering. But her eyes, hollow with pain, held something unbreakable. Demon recognized her from Roland's description. "Lyanna," he breathed. In the medical wing, Mira had been resting, her shoulder bandaged, exhaustion finally claiming her. But suddenly she sat bolt upright, her omega senses flaring with impossible recognition. "Mama," she whispered. Then she screamed it, "Mama!" She tore out of the room despite Dr. Thorne's protests, her wounded shoulder forgotten. She ran through the keep with desperate speed, her small legs pumping as fast as they could carry her. Guards moved aside, understanding without words what was happening. Demon had carried Lyanna inside, was lowering her gently to the courtyard stones when Mira burst through the doors. Mother and daughter locked eyes across the blood-stained courtyard. Mira froze. 3 years of abandonment warred with desperate hope. 3 years of waiting in that alley, of believing she'd been left behind, of surviving on dreams and impossible bonds. Lyanna tried to stand, failed, fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her ravaged face. "Mira," she gasped, her voice raw. "My baby. My brave, beautiful baby." The wall inside Mira cracked, then shattered completely. She ran. She crashed into her mother's arms with enough force to knock them both over. They collapsed together onto the stones, sobbing, holding each other with desperate strength. Lyanna's hands shook as she touched Myra's face, her hair, her shoulders, confirming she was real, not another dream, not another hallucination born from torture and despair. "I'm sorry," Lyanna sobbed. "I'm so sorry, baby. I never wanted to leave you. I never stopped fighting to get back to you. Every day, every nightmare, I thought of you. I held on for you." Mira was crying too hard to form words, just clutching her mother, her small body shaking with years of held grief finally finding release. The hardened warriors watching this reunion looked away, many wiping their own eyes. Even Kale, stoic and stern, felt his throat tighten with emotion. Demon gave them space, but his mind was already racing. Lyanna's condition was critical. She needed immediate medical attention, and even then. He caught Dr. Thorne's eye. The doctor's expression was grim. She might not survive. In the medical wing, while Lyanna and Mira still clung to each other, Dr. Thorne conducted his examination with gentle efficiency. His diagnosis confirmed Demon's worst fears. "She's been systematically tortured," Thorne said quietly, out of Myra's hearing. They drained her blood repeatedly, injected her with experimental compounds, broke and rebroke bones to study her healing capacity. "Her body has been pushed beyond what any wolf should endure. It's a miracle she's alive at all. Can you save her?" Demon's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his desperation. "I don't know," Thorne admitted. "Her body's ability to heal itself has been severely compromised. The torture, the experiments, they've damaged her at a cellular level. There must be something." Thorne hesitated, then, "There's one possibility. You taught me to be brave, Mama. You taught me that when the bad men came, I should throw my ball even though I was scared. You taught me that protecting people you love is what makes you strong." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I choose to save you. I choose it. Mira, please. I don't need to be special, Mama." Myra's voice was small but certain. "I just need you." Lyanna sobbed, shaking her head, but Demon stepped forward. "This is Myra's choice," he said gently. "She's earned the right to make it. She's 6 years old." Lyanna's protest was anguished. "She's 6 years old and she's saved my life, defended a pack under siege, and stood between attackers and innocents without flinching. Demon knelt beside them both. Age is just a number, Lyanna. Courage is what matters. And your daughter has more courage than most warriors I've known in 2 centuries. Mira squeezed her mother's hands. Please, Mama. Let me do this. Let me save you like you saved me. Lyanna looked at her daughter, this brave, impossible child who'd survived hell and come out the other side still believing in love, and knew she'd lost this argument. Okay, she whispered. Okay, baby. But if anything goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong, Mira said with the confidence of children who haven't learned to doubt. We're going to be together. That's all that matters. The transfusion took hours. Dr. Thorne, with his most skilled assistants, carefully transferred blood from Mira to Lyanna using equipment that combined modern medicine with ancient wolf healing magic. The medical wing was silent except for breathing and the soft hum of machinery. Demon watched from the doorway, unable to look away. Kale stood beside him, both of them rigid with tension. You care for them, Kale said quietly. Both of them. Demon didn't deny it. That child taught me something I'd forgotten, that strength isn't about domination. It's about protection, about choosing to stand when you could run. And her mother. He paused. She sacrificed everything for love. Endured torture, orchestrated her own daughter's discovery by me, maintained a psychic bond across years and miles. How can I not respect that? It's more than respect, Kale observed. Demon said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. On the medical tables, Mira grew pale, her small body giving up its life force to save her mother. But she stayed conscious through sheer will, her eyes fixed on Lyanna's face. Lyanna's body began responding almost immediately. Color returned to her cheeks. Wounds that had refused to heal for years began closing. Her breathing steadied, deepened. But something else was happening too. The silver glow that had marked Mira as hybrid began to fade like morning mist under sunlight. Her scent changed, stabilizing into something between Omega and Alpha but no longer transcendent. No longer impossible. When it was finally over, Dr. Thorne checked both patients with trembling hands. They're alive, he said, his voice thick with emotion. They're stable. The transfusion worked. And their abilities? Demon asked, though he already knew. Gone. Or rather, reduced to normal ranges. Thorne showed him the new readings. Mira has Omega empathy and slightly above average reflexes for her age. Lyanna has baseline Omega traits with good healing capacity. They're ordinary now. Demon looked at Mira, exhausted but smiling as she held her mother's hand. At Lyanna, alive and whole for the first time in years, tears of joy streaming down her face. Ordinary, he murmured. As if there's anything ordinary about them. Myra's voice, weak but content, drifted to him, Mama. You're really staying this time? I'm really staying, baby. Forever and always. Good. Because I have so much to show you. My room, and my books, and my friends, and Alpha Demon is really nice, and Dr. Thorne tells funny stories, and Captain Renna is teaching me knife throwing, not the special way, just the regular way, and... She yawned hugely. And I'm really sleepy, Mama. Sleep, sweetheart. I'll be right here when you wake up. For the first time in 3 years, Mira fell asleep holding her mother's hand, safe and whole and home. And in the doorway, Demon Nightshade felt something shift in his chest, a wall he'd built after losing his first family finally beginning to crumble. He'd saved them. But more importantly, they'd saved him. 2 weeks passed in a blur of recovery and reconstruction. The keep's defenses were repaired. The fallen were honored in a ceremony that brought tears even from the hardest warriors. The survivors, both defenders and former attackers, began the slow process of building something new together. Mira and Lyanna were inseparable, making up for 3 years of separation. They did everything together, meals, walks through the keep's gardens, even therapy sessions with the pack counselor. Lyanna told Mira stories about her father, a brave warrior who died defending their pack. She taught her songs in the old language, braided her hair the way Myra's grandmother had taught her, showed her the traditional dances of their people. Mira, in turn, showed Lyanna her ball, the precious, worn ball that had been her only companion for so long. "You kept it," Lyanna whispered, touching it with reverent fingers. "You told me to," Mira said simply. "You said it would bring me back to you." "And it did, Mama. It really did." They cried together, holding the ball between them, this simple object that had saved a king and reunited a family. Demon watched them from a distance, giving them space but unable to stay completely away. Something about them pulled at him, Myra's brave spirit, Lyanna's fierce love, the way they'd survived hell and come out still believing in goodness. He found himself seeking them out. Taking meals with them. Reading to Mira before bed when Lyanna was too exhausted. Walking with Lyanna through the gardens while Mira played with other pups. Slowly, carefully, they became something like a family. But peace, as always, was temporary. The council's messenger arrived with their ultimatum. Demon read the formal summons in his study, Kale and Dr. Thorne flanking him. Since the transfusion, Mira and Lyanna were no longer classified as genetic threats. Their hybrid traits had stabilized to normal ranges. They were, by council standards, acceptable. However, Demon's defiance could not be ignored. Alpha King Demon Nightshade is hereby ordered to appear before a formal tribunal to answer charges of harboring fugitives, inciting rebellion against council authority, invoking obsolete laws for personal gain, and general conduct unbecoming of an Alpha King. The penalty, if convicted, would be death. "It's a trap," Kale said immediately. "They'll use legal mechanisms to strip your title, execute you, and install someone more compliant." "I know." Demon set the summons down. "Then we fight." Kale's voice was fierce. "We have packs loyal to us. The Eastern Territories, the Northern clans, even some of the traditionalists who saw what happened here. We can raise an army. And start a civil war that will kill thousands." Demon shook his head. "No. I'll go to the tribunal." "Demon. But not as a defendant." His eyes gleamed with dangerous intent. "As a revolutionary." For 3 days, Demon barely slept. He worked in his study, surrounded by ancient texts, legal documents, and maps of all the territories. When he finally emerged, he carried a leather portfolio containing something unprecedented. He gathered his inner circle, Kale, Dr. Thorne, Captain Renna, and surprisingly, Lyanna. "I need your input," he said, spreading documents across his conference table. "All of you." What they saw made them catch their breath. The Reformation Accords, a complete restructuring of pack law. Lyanna read through the document, her hands trembling. When she looked up, tears shimmered in her eyes. "This is what we dreamed of in Shadowmere," she whispered. "Full legal rights for Omegas. Protection for genetic diversity. Term limits for council members. Earned leadership instead of birthright." She looked at Demon with something like awe. "But they'll never accept it. They will if enough packs support it." Demon's voice was certain. "I'm calling a grand gathering. Every pack in all the territories. And I'm forcing a vote." The audacity of it stole their breath. "You're trying to bring democracy to an authoritarian system," Dr. Thorne said slowly. "You're asking wolves who've known only hierarchy for millennia to choose equality." "Yes. It's insane," Kale said. Then he grinned fiercely. "I love it. When do we start?" That night, as preparations began for what would either be a revolution or a funeral, Mira approached Demon in his study. She stood in the doorway, small and uncertain, clutching her ball. In the weeks since the transfusion, she'd lost the silver glow, the impossible strength. She looked like what she was, a 7-year-old girl who'd seen too much. "Alpha Demon?" Her voice was soft. He looked up, smiling despite his exhaustion. "What is it, little one?" When you go to talk to the council. She took a deep breath. Will you come back? The fear in her voice broke his heart. He set down his pen and knelt to her level. I promise you, Mira. I will come back. You can't promise that. Her eyes were too old, carrying the wisdom of someone who'd learned that promises could be broken. Mama promised she'd come back, and it took 3 years. Demon pulled her into a hug, feeling how small she was, how fragile. You're right. I can't promise nothing bad will happen. But I promise I'll fight with everything I have to come home to you. Because you and your mother, you're my family now. Mira was quiet for a long moment, her face pressed against his shoulder. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper. Can I call you Alpha, Dad? Demon's throat closed up. He'd lost his own daughter years ago to illness, had lost his first mate to the grief that followed. The wounds had never fully healed, and he'd thought he'd never have a family again. This small, brave girl was offering him a second chance. I would be honored, he managed, his voice rough with emotion. Mira pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. Promise you'll try to come back? To me and Mama? I promise, little one. I'll fight with everything I am. She nodded, apparently satisfied, and slipped from the room as quietly as she'd entered. Demon sat alone in his study, staring at the Reformation Accords that would either change their world or get him killed. Outside the window, the moon rose over Iron Moon Keep. And somewhere in the territories, enemies were preparing. The real battle was about to begin. Chapter 5. The ancient valley had never seen so many wolves in one place. Over 3,000 gathered on the rolling grasslands, representatives from every pack in the known territories. Banners flew from makeshift camps, colors and symbols representing centuries of tradition, rivalry, and alliance. The air hummed with tension and possibility. Demon stood at the edge of his camp, watching the sun rise over this unprecedented gathering. Beside him, Lyanna adjusted the ceremonial robe he wore, traditional garb for formal council proceedings, but he'd had it modified. Where council members wore symbols of hierarchy and dominance, his bore symbols of unity and protection. Nervous? Lyanna asked softly. Terrified, he admitted. What I'm attempting has never been done. I'm asking wolves who've known only hierarchy for millennia to choose democracy. You're asking them to choose freedom. Lyanna's hand found his. Over the past weeks, something had developed between them, tentative, careful, but undeniably real. That's worth being terrified for. Mira emerged from their tent, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She wore a simple dress, her hair braided by her mother's skilled hands. She looked like any other 7-year-old, except for the old wisdom in her eyes and the worn rubber ball she still carried everywhere. Is it time? She asked. Almost. Demon knelt beside her. Remember what we talked about? Mira nodded seriously. I tell my story. I don't be scared. I let them see me. That's right. He touched her cheek gently. You're the bravest person I know, little one. I'm just me now, Mira said matter-of-factly. Not special strong. Just regular brave. Regular brave is the best kind, Lyanna said, gathering her daughter close. Kale appeared, his expression grim. The councils arrived. Full procession. They're making a show of it. Demon stood, squaring his shoulders. Let them. Theater is all they have left. The grand gathering convened in a natural amphitheater, a bowl in the earth where acoustics carried voices to every corner. The council sat on an elevated platform, 7 thrones arranged in judgment. Elder Malachi sat center, flanked by Cordelia and Thane, with 4 lesser elders completing the circle. They looked down on the assembled masses with the confidence of those who'd never truly been challenged. That was about to change. Demon entered the amphitheater with his inner circle, Kale, Captain Renna, Dr. Thorne. But he also brought Lyanna and Mira, and the crowd murmured at the sight. Survivors of the extinct Shadowmere pack, walking proof of the council's lies. Elder Malachi's voice boomed across the valley. Alpha King Demon Nightshade. You stand accused of harboring fugitives, inciting rebellion, and conduct unbecoming. I stand accused of nothing, Demon interrupted, his voice carrying with equal power. I stand here as a witness. And I bring other witnesses to truths the council has tried to bury. The crowd stirred, interest piqued. You will be silent, Cordelia began. No. Demon's alpha presence filled the space. For centuries, you've silenced those who questioned. Those who dared to imagine something better. Today, the silencing ends. He gestured, and Kale began distributing documents to PAC representatives, copies of the evidence they'd gathered. Communications ordering the Shadowmere genocide. Records of illegal experiments. Proof of systematic corruption. The crowd erupted in shocked voices as they read. Order. Thane roared, pounding his staff. This is theater. Manufactured evidence. Then let the witnesses speak, Demon countered. Let Lioness Shadowmere tell her story. Unless you're afraid of what she'll say. The council couldn't refuse without appearing guilty. Malachi's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. Lioness stepped forward. She was small, ordinary-looking now, but her voice carried across the valley with quiet strength. I am Lioness Shadowmere. For 5 years, I was imprisoned in a council facility. Tortured. Bled. Studied like an animal. She showed her scars, rolling up her sleeves to reveal the marks of systematic abuse. Not because I committed crimes, but because I represented change. The Omega Wolves in the crowd leaned forward, recognizing their own oppression in her words. My pack believed that designation shouldn't equal destiny. That Omegas could be strong, Alphas could be gentle, and the rigid hierarchy was holding us back. Her voice grew stronger. We created Project Genesis to prove it. We succeeded. And for that success, we were exterminated. Lies. Elder Cordelia shrieked. The Shadowmere pack was dangerous. They violated sacred laws. Dangerous to you, Lioness shot back. Because we proved you wrong. Because we showed that your natural order was just a system designed to keep you in power. She detailed the torture, the experiments, the council's desperation to understand and control hybrid genetics. The crowd listened in horrified silence. I endured 5 years of hell because I knew my daughter was alive. Because I maintained a psychic bond across miles and years, teaching her to survive, guiding her throes, keeping her safe. Tears streamed down Lioness' face. The council wanted me to break. To give up. To die. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She turned to face Malachi directly. You thought you could erase us. Bury the truth. But here I stand. Here my daughter stands. Living proof that your lies have expiration dates. The applause started small, a few Omega Wolves, then more, then entire sections of the crowd rising to their feet. The council members looked increasingly uncomfortable. Then Mira stepped forward. The crowd quieted, curious about this small child who'd somehow become central to everything. I'm Mira, she said in her soft voice. I'm 7. I lived in an alley for 3 years because my pack was killed. I ate from garbage. I was cold and scared and alone. The simplicity of her words hit harder than any political speech. Then I saw bad men hurting Alpha Demon. I was afraid, but I threw my ball at them because Mama taught me to be brave when people need help. She held up her worn ball, covered in duct tape and love. Alpha Demon didn't leave me in the alley. He brought me home. She looked at the council, her young face serious. You wanted to kill me because I was different. Because I had special powers that scared you. But I don't have them anymore. She held out her arms, turning slowly. I'm just a regular Omega pup now. The special things are gone. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. But I'm still brave, Mira continued. And being brave doesn't need special powers. It just needs a choice. I chose to save my alpha. I chose to protect the nursery pups. I chose to give my blood to save my mama, even though it meant losing what made me special. She walked closer to the council platform, small and vulnerable before their thrones. If you kill me now, I'm just a little girl. Not a threat. Not a weapon. Just me. Her voice cracked slightly. Is that what you do? Kill little girls because you're scared of what they might mean? The silence that followed was deafening. Then a voice from the crowd, an Omega mother holding her own pup, called out, "Shame. Shame on the council." Others took up the cry. Shame. Shame. Elder Malachi tried to restore order, but the moment had shifted. The council had lost control of the narrative. Demon stepped forward, pulling out the leather portfolio. "I present to you the Reformation Accords," he announced. "A complete restructuring of pack law. Full legal rights for Omegas. Protection for genetic diversity. Term limits for council members. Leadership earned through merit, not birthright." He held up the document for all to see. "I'm not asking the council's permission. I'm asking the packs to choose. Vote for these reforms, and we build a better world together. Vote against them, and we continue as we always have, with fear, oppression, and systematic abuse of power." Elder Malachi rose from his throne, his face purple with rage. "This is not how we do things. The council decides." "The council," Demon roared with alpha command that made even the elders flinch, "serves at the pleasure of the packs. Or have you forgotten that in your centuries of corruption?" The gathered alphas began calling for a vote. Even some traditionalists were swayed by the evidence of council crimes, by Liona's testimony, by Myra's innocent courage. "Let the packs decide," voices shouted. "Democracy, not tyranny. Vote. Vote. Vote." The chant grew until even the council couldn't ignore it. Reluctantly, bitterly, Malachi called for a formal vote. "All packs in favor of these so-called reforms, declare yourselves." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Alpha Roland of the Eastern Territories stood. "I support reform. The old ways are killing us, strangling innovation and compassion. We need change." One by one, alphas stood. First the smaller packs, those who'd suffered most under the hierarchy, whose Omega members had been abused, whose children had been denied opportunities based on designation. Then medium packs, seeing which way the momentum was building. Then larger packs, traditional strongholds, surprising everyone by standing for change. The wave became a tsunami. When the count was finished, it was overwhelming. 78% of packs supported the Reformation Accords. The council had been overthrown by democracy. Elder Malachi's face twisted with fury and desperation. He'd ruled for 3 centuries, had never known defeat, couldn't comprehend losing power to a vote. "No," he snarled. "This is treason. This is chaos. I will not." He shifted mid-sentence, his ancient wolf form erupting with explosive force. He lunged not at Demon, but at the symbol of everything he hated, Mira. If he couldn't maintain the old order, he'd eliminate the symbol of change. But he underestimated the bonds that had formed. 36 bodies moved to intercept. Demon, Liona, Kale, Captain Rena, Dr. Thorne, but also Omega Pack members from across the territories. Mothers, fathers, caregivers who'd found their courage watching a 7-year-old stand before the council. They formed a living wall between the Elder and Mira. Demon caught Malachi mid-leap, their bodies colliding with earth-shaking force. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. The fight was brief. Malachi was ancient and powerful, but Demon fought with the strength of someone protecting family. He pinned the Elder, his claws at the old wolf's throat. "The old world is dead," Demon said coldly. "And you died with it." He didn't kill Malachi, death would have been mercy. Instead, he stripped him of his title and authority. "You'll live. But as an Omega, at the bottom of the hierarchy you enforced so cruelly. Let's see how you enjoy the system you built." For someone who'd valued power above all else, it was a fate worse than death. The other corrupt elders, Cordelia and Thane, were similarly stripped of authority. They'd be allowed to live, but never to hold power again. New council members were elected on the spot, chosen by popular vote. The new council included 2 Omegas, 3 Alphas, and 2 Betas, a balanced representation that would have been unthinkable days ago. The werewolf world had transformed in a single day. In the weeks following the grand gathering, change rippled across all territories. The Reformation Accords were implemented with surprising speed. Centuries of oppression had created pent-up demand for justice, and now that the dam had broken, the flood was unstoppable. Omegas began attending leadership academies. Forced matings were annulled by the hundreds. Genetic purity laws were abolished, allowing for mixed designation relationships. The rigid hierarchy that had defined werewolf society for millennia began to crumble. It wasn't perfect. Change never was. Traditionalist packs resisted, creating pockets of the old world. There were protests, occasional violence, communities that refused to adapt. But the momentum was irreversible. The young generation, pups who'd grown up hearing about Mira, the little girl who'd stood before the council, embraced the new world eagerly. To them, designation was just one aspect of identity, not a destiny. Back at Iron Moon Keep, life settled into something resembling normalcy. Demon officially adopted both Mira and Lyanna into his pack line through a formal ceremony. They were no longer refugees or survivors, they were family, recognized by law and tradition. Mira started school with other pack pups, integrated into regular classes. She was ordinary now, but she was also a legend. The pup who saved the Alpha King was whispered with reverence in hallways and playgrounds. She struggled sometimes with not being special anymore. One night, 2 months after the grand gathering, she sat in Demon's study while he worked on new legislation. She was quieter than usual, her ball held loosely in her hands. "Alpha Dad," she said softly. He looked up immediately, recognizing the tone. "What's wrong, little one?" "I miss being strong. The special kind of strong." Her voice was small, ashamed. "Is that bad?" "I saved Mama, and I'm glad, but sometimes I miss it. The way I could feel everything, move so fast, be so much. Now I'm just regular." Demon set down his pen and came around the desk, kneeling beside her chair. "You're not just regular, Mira. You're extraordinary. But not because of genetics or hybrid abilities." "Then why?" "Because strength isn't about how hard you can hit or how fast you can move. It's about getting up every time you're knocked down. You did that for 3 years in that alley. You survived alone when most adults would have given up. The transfusion didn't take that away." Mira thought about this, her young face serious. "So I'm different strong now? Not super strong, but brave strong?" "Exactly." He ruffled her hair gently. "Brave strong is the best kind, because it's a choice. Anyone can be born with power. But choosing to be brave when you're afraid? That's real strength." She seemed to accept this, her expression lightening. "I like being regular anyway. I have friends now. Real friends who like me because I'm funny, not because I'm scary special. See? That's worth more than any hybrid ability." She hugged him suddenly, fiercely. "I'm glad you're my alpha dad." "I'm glad you're my daughter," he said, his throat tight with emotion. The relationship between Demon and Lyanna developed slowly, carefully, built on friendship first. They had tea together in the mornings while Mira slept in, talking about pack politics, trauma recovery, hopes for the future. Lyanna helped Demon understand Omega perspectives, making him a better leader. Demon gave Lyanna safety and space to heal from years of torture. They didn't rush into anything romantic. Both were damaged, him from losing his first mate and daughter, her from systematic abuse and years of separation from her child. They needed time to be whole individuals before becoming something together. But 6 months after the grand gathering, something shifted. They were in the gardens, watching Mira play with other pups in the courtyard below. She was laughing, completely at ease, her ball flying between her and her friends in an improvised game. "I never thought I'd have this," Lionel said softly, her hand resting on the stone railing. "Peace. Safety. A future for my daughter that doesn't involve hiding or running." Demon's hand covered hers carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "Neither did I," he admitted. "I thought I'd die alone, crushed under the weight of duty and old grief. But that little girl, your daughter, saved more than my life. She saved my soul." Lionel turned to look at him, her eyes soft. "She saved mine too. But so did you. You could have left her in that alley. Instead, you brought her home, protected her, fought the entire council for her. You gave us both a second chance. You're easy to fight for," Demon said quietly. They stood close, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Lionel leaned her head against his shoulder, and Demon's arm came around her waist naturally, comfortably. "Take your time," she whispered. "We have all the time in the world now." "All the time in the world," he agreed. They stood like that, healing together, while their daughter played below in the golden afternoon light. 8 months after the grand gathering, Demon and Lionel formalized their mating bond in a quiet ceremony attended only by close family and friends. It wasn't a political marriage like his union with Serafina had been. This was love, built on mutual respect, shared trauma, and the bonds formed through protecting what mattered most. Mira was thrilled. "Does this mean you're officially my alpha dad forever?" "I was always going to be your alpha dad forever," Demon said, lifting her into his arms. "But yes, now it's official." "Good," Mira declared. "Because you're really good at bedtime stories, and I want to keep you." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. No grand displays or political maneuvering, just two damaged souls promising to build something new together. That night, as they celebrated with their pack, an unexpected visitor arrived. She was an older Omega woman, silver-haired, carrying herself with quiet dignity despite obvious nervousness. She requested an audience with Lionel, claiming urgent family business. When they met in Demon's study, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "Lionel? Is it really you? I heard rumors after the grand gathering, but I didn't dare hope." Lionel stared, her face going pale. "Mother?" It was Lionel's mother, whom she'd believed died in the Shadowmere genocide. She'd survived by hiding in human society, living under a false name, too terrified to reveal herself while the council still held power. But when news of the Reformation spread, when she heard that Lionel Shadowmere had testified before the grand gathering, she dared to come forward. The reunion was emotional, years of grief and loss pouring out in tears and tight embraces. Then Lionel pulled Mira forward. "Mother, this is your granddaughter. Mira, this is your grandmother." Mira looked up at this woman who shared her silver hair and gentle eyes. "I have a grandma." "You have a grandma," the woman confirmed, kneeling to Mira's level. "And I've waited 7 years to meet you, little one." Mira studied her carefully, then made her decision. She stepped forward and hugged her grandmother with the easy trust of children who'd finally learned they were safe. The family, fractured by genocide, separated by torture and survival, was beginning to heal. 1 year after the alley incident, Demon took Mira back to where it all began. The alley looked different in daylight, smaller, less menacing, just another forgotten corner of the human district. But it was sacred ground for both of them. "Why are we here?" Mira asked, clutching Demon's hand. "Because this is where our story started," he said. "And I want you to see it with new eyes. With healing eyes." They stood in the spot where he'd almost died, where she'd saved him with nothing but a rubber ball and impossible courage. "I was so scared," Mira admitted, looking around at the graffiti-stained walls, the dumpsters where she'd hidden. "I thought if I didn't do something, the bad men would hurt you. And then they'd find me and hurt me worse. But you acted anyway," Demon said gently. "That's what courage is, being afraid but choosing to act because it's right." Mira walked to the spot where she'd lived, behind the dumpsters and crates. I used to wait here every day, hoping Mama would come back. I'd throw my ball against the walls and pretend she was teaching me, guiding my hands like she used to. She was teaching you, Demon reminded her. Through the dream bond. She never stopped being your mother, even when she couldn't be with you. Mira was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she did something unexpected. She took her ball, her precious, worn ball covered in duct tape and memories, and placed it carefully against the alley wall. "What are you doing?" Demon asked, surprised. "Leaving it here for another little girl who might need it. Someone who's scared and alone like I was." Myra's voice was certain. "Maybe it'll help them be brave too. Maybe it'll save someone like it saved us." Demon's heart swelled with pride. This child, who'd clung to that ball through years of suffering, was choosing to give it away to help someone else. "Are you sure? It's special to you." "That's why it'll help," Mira said simply. "Because it has love in it. Mama's love, your love, my brave. Someone needs that more than I do now." She pulled a permanent marker from her pocket, borrowed from Demon's desk, and wrote carefully on the ball's surface. "You are braver than you know. M." They walked away together, hand in hand, leaving behind the ball and the past it represented. Behind them, the alley remained, a place of pain transformed into a place of hope. Epilogue, 5 years later. Mira was 12 now, standing on the threshold of adolescence and her first full shift. The entire family gathered in the ceremonial clearing, Lyanna and Demon, her grandmother, Beta Kale, Dr. Thorne, Captain Renna, all the people who'd become her extended family. Other young wolves who were shifting for the first time stood with her, a whole generation coming of age in the new world. Mira was nervous but excited. This was a milestone, a rite of passage that every young wolf experienced. When the shift came, it was different from that agonizing first time years ago. This was natural, guided, her wolf emerging with joy rather than trauma. Her fur was light brown with silver highlights, a reminder of what she'd once been, but beautiful in its own right. She was normal-sized, neither unusually large nor small. Her eyes were gentle amber, unmistakably omega. She wasn't special in the supernatural sense anymore. But when she shifted back, exhausted and happy, surrounded by her family's proud faces, she knew she was special in all the ways that mattered. She was loved. She was brave. She was whole. That night, as she fell asleep between her parents, Lyanna's arm around her, Demon's hand on her hair, she dreamed. Not of trauma or pain, but of the future. She saw herself growing up, attending the Leadership Academy, now open to Omegas, making a difference in the world. She saw the pack territories thriving under new laws. She saw children of all designations playing together, learning together, their futures unlimited by artificial hierarchies. She saw hope. Meanwhile, in the human district, a young Omega boy huddled in an abandoned building. His name was Lucas, and he was 9 years old. His pack had been destroyed in a rogue attack 3 days ago. He'd hidden in the basement while his family was slaughtered. Now he was alone, terrified, certain he would die in this cold, cruel human world. He'd found shelter in an old warehouse, but he had no food, no water, no hope. That's when he saw it. A worn rubber ball, covered in duct tape and love, sitting against an alley wall. He almost walked past it, but something made him stop. The ball looked important somehow. Precious. He picked it up, examining it. There was writing on the surface, faded but still legible. "You are braver than you know. M." Lucas didn't understand what it meant. Who was M? Why would someone leave a ball with such a strange message? But he held the ball tight against his chest, and somewhere deep inside, in a place he thought had died with his family, he felt a tiny spark. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. But possibility. He looked at the ball again, read the message one more time. "You are braver than you know." Maybe he was. Maybe he could survive. Maybe there was a reason he'd lived when everyone else had died. He tucked the ball into his jacket, feeling its weight against his heart. Then he started walking, not sure where he was going, but moving forward instead of curling up to die. The cycle continued. Hope persisted. And the legacy of a little girl who'd saved a king, who'd changed the world with nothing but courage and a rubber ball, lived on in the hearts of lost children finding their way home. Years passed. Lucas eventually found his way to Iron Moon Keep, guided by rumors of a place where lost pups were welcomed. He was adopted, healed, grew strong. When he was old enough, he became a youth counselor, helping other traumatized young wolves recover. He always carried that ball with him, showed it to the children in his care, told them Myra's story. There was a little girl who was alone and scared, just like you, he'd say. She had nothing but this ball. And she chose to be brave. She saved a king, changed the world, and left this behind so others could find courage too. The ball became a symbol. When a child graduated from Lucas's program, healed and ready to face the world, they'd hold the ball one last time. Then it would be passed to the next child who needed it. Myra's courage, contained in duct tape and rubber, continued to save lives decades after she'd left it in that alley. On Myra's 20th birthday, Demon gave her a gift. It was a small wooden box, beautifully carved with symbols of family and courage. Inside was a letter. My dearest daughter. By the time you read this, you'll be an adult, ready to make your own mark on the world we built together. I wanted you to know what you meant to me, to us all. You were 6 years old when you saved my life. You didn't know I was a king, didn't care about politics or power. You just saw someone who needed help, and you chose to be brave. That choice changed everything. It changed me. It changed our world. You gave up your hybrid abilities to save your mother. You left your most precious possession to help a stranger. You stood before the council without fear. You forgave those who betrayed you. These weren't the actions of someone special because of genetics. These were the actions of someone special because of character. Never forget, you are braver than you know. You always have been. You always will be. All my love, Alpha Dad. Mira cried reading it, then carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the box. She'd treasure it forever, this tangible proof that she mattered, that her choices had meaning, that ordinary courage could change the world. And in a small town in the Eastern Territories, a little girl named Sage found a worn rubber ball in an alley. She read the message written in faded ink. You are braver than you know. M. She didn't know about Mira or Demon or the Reformation. She was just a scared 8-year-old who'd run away from an abusive pack and didn't know where to go. But she held that ball tight, and somewhere deep inside, she found a spark of courage. She started walking toward the rumors she'd heard. Stories of a place called Iron Moon Keep, where lost pups were welcomed and loved. The cycle continued. Hope persisted. And the legacy lived on. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.